Hi guys, it's me. I'm doing a few more videos for you. First one I'm going to do though is to finish off the block that we made in part 1. But the first thing I'm going to show you is the completed square that we made, but there is a reason for that. So this is the square that we've been making this week. Very pretty it is too. And I'm just going to show you that it is important to count on occasions. So we need to know how many stitches we've got along here. I'm going to count from this stitch marker to here. What I am going to do first though is give you a couple of stitch anatomy lesson, I guess. That's the only way I could describe it. So here we have a treble stitch, and this piece I'm pointing to here, I'm trying to make sure it's in good focus for you guys, right? This piece here is the post of a stitch. If I just pull slightly, you can see that's the post. And at the top of the stitch there is a V, which we all know is our nice neat edge, and if I just tug, you can see a slight hole to the right of the post, which is where you would insert your hook for that complete stitch. So when counting a stitch, it's better to count the post to get the true stitch, because the V is slightly off to the right and where you would insert your hook is slightly off to the right. This can sometimes cause confusion when knowing where to insert your hook when a pattern's asking you to put your hook in a particular stitch, and when counting, because last thing you want is to be getting frustrated with an off count. So I'm going to count from this stitch marker here, which is just to the right to the center post in this corner, but I'm going to count the posts as we go around. So from this post, that's post number 1, then we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, and it's the post we count 29. If we just counted where the stitch marker was, we may think we've miscounted, but in reality we haven't. As you can see, the stitch marker is just to the right of the post of the stitch itself, and this is where counting can be confusing, especially if you're a newbie out there, peeps. But I'll cover that a bit more when I do some videos on this particular pattern. But we're going to nip back now to doing the slip stitches up the edge of the piece of work. And the reason we counted 29 is because we need 29 stitches up the side of our piece of work. You may have seen the instructions. These are in the files tab at the top of the treacle crochet along page, and Jane the designer gives you her way of ensuring that you have nice even stitches along the side of your piece of work. She also suggests what hook size to use as well. Remember guys, if you've had to change your hook size, to use the corresponding hook that you are using. These are slip stitches, we don't want them to be too tight, we've got to work into them later on when we're putting the blanket together. I have a slightly different method which has a bit of a rule of thumb, which will hopefully help you with a few other projects in the future. But I'll show you the pieces of work I've done, and then I'll actually demonstrate for you as well. So this piece here has got 29 stitches across the side here, as you can see. But in this one I took the easy option, and if I show you the other end it'd be easier to explain. If you look at the end of your rows, especially on the taller stitches, you can see a clear space that would be lovely to just stick your hook in there and collect. But by doing that you're working around the post of the stitch, and yes, it gives you a good base for the slip stitches along the side, but what it also does is create gaps. So when you come to put these pieces together at the end, when you pull, you will see holes appear in your piece of work. It doesn't give a very neat finish. So although it seems like a quicker way of doing something, quicker isn't always better. And in this particular instance, in the dense fabric here where you've got all your double crochets, it wouldn't matter so much because it's a dense fabric. But when you've got a more open fabric with taller stitches, it can make a huge difference to the end of your piece of work. So when we are putting our edge across here, we are working through the stitch. So we've got a nice base, but we're also not creating an unsightly hole while we do it. So I'm going to demonstrate now and explain my rule of thumb for you as well. Okay. So as a general rule, I'll use the coloured piece because my swatch is all one colour and it might confuse you a bit. As a general rule of thumb, at the end of a single crochet, if you're US terminology, double crochet if it's UK, you want to place one slip stitch at the end of each row, as a general rule of thumb. With the treble stitches, we want to evenly place 2 slip stitches at the end of this row, and in the very long double trebles, in UK terminology, treble in US, we are placing 3 stitches evenly across the post of that stitch, or the turning chain if it's the other end. Okay, now when counting up, if you were to follow that rule of thumb exactly to the letter, we would have 31 and we only need 39. But I also discovered that these lovely little glints of colour here, so we've got the lily if you're using the life, and I think it's fondant if you're using the special, and aqua rose here. Because of the way they are worked, especially in my case, because I don't use my turning chain as my first, I use my turning chain, as my first stitch rather than not, so I have a nice straight edge. They're very hard to get into, so these are quite good points to skip to give us our 29 stitches. So I've gone into, as my general rule of thumb, I've gone in once at the end of a double crochet row, 3 times at the end of a double treble row, and 2 at the end of a treble. But I've skipped these 2 ends out. You can't really tell. It hasn't made a big difference, and we still have 29 stitches, which is what we want. So I'm going to demonstrate that to you now. So I've created this swatch. It's just a small swatch, but I wanted to use chunky yarn so I could show you what I'm doing. Where these stitch markers are where the lily and the aqua are in the original pattern. This is the dense end. This is the bottom where the 6 rows of double crochet are, and this end is where the taller stitches are, where the waves are. But I'll explain as I go along. So we're just going to attach this yarn in the very first double, and what we need to do is collect 2 strands at the end of this row, and this 2 strands will give us a nice base for the slip stitch to hold on to, but also doesn't create a massive hole. So we're going to just pull our yarn up and do our first slip stitch. This end I will probably weave in once this row is finished, so that when we join together we crochet over it and fasten it in at the same time. So just leave it for now. It won't really cause you any problems, but you can weave it in afterwards as shown in previous videos in exactly the same manner and crochet over it when we come to put all the pieces together. So that's our first slip stitch. So then we're going to collect 2 strands in the end of the next row and do another one. We're not trying to do this too tight, folks. We need to work into these stitches later on, so just remember that. Sorry about the DIY in the background, but I've got the window open, it's red hot in here. So again, collecting 2, that's 3 slip stitches, so that's 1 row of double, 2 row of double, 3 row of double, and we have 3 slip stitches across the top. So we're going into the 4th row now, which is also double, so requires 1 slip stitch in the end, and again the same in the next. There. And this one will complete the last row of teal doubles. This row here, like I say, in the actual piece is where the little flashes of pink are. If you're using pink, you may be using different colours. So I'm going to skip the end of that row and then go into the next, which is the fern row of doubles. And I've split me on there, sorry peeps. Right, here we go, right there. So as you can see, it doesn't make a big difference, you can't really tell. Our next stitch is a treble, and this just happens to be a turning chain, but a turning chain still consists of 3 strands of yarn, and therefore you can still collect 2, but we need to make 2 slip stitches evenly across this treble. So there's 1 at the bottom and we'll place 1 at the top. Like so. Then we have another treble. Again, collect 2 strands for 1 slip stitch. It's fiddly, I appreciate that, and if you need to, use a smaller hook to actually collect your yarn, but it's worth to get a nice finish. So we're there now. Okay, so we're now at the point where we are coming up to the aqua flash point, but we've still got a row to do in front. So that's a single crochet row, and then we have our flashes, so we're going to miss that and go into the next, which is a single crochet row. If you're US, double crochet in UK terms. Sorry if this video keeps blurring out, I'm trying really hard. So that's the one in there. Then we're back to a treble here, people. So that's 1, 2 in the end of a treble row, remember. So from now on we're not skipping any more stitches, okay. So that is the treble row, which is in the olive colour. Then we have a single row of teal. Just check, thought I picked too much up there. Don't pick too much. If you pick up more than 2 strands, you're just going into the around the post of the actual stitch in that last stitch there. So now we're at the point where the waves are going to start, but the very first row of the waves is a double crochet row. It starts with a double crochet anyway. So again, it's 1 stitch in the end of that row. So we pull up and across. Now we're coming to a double treble, and this is where the row either ends or starts with a double treble. So this is where we need to place 3 stitches evenly across the post of this stitch or across the turning chain. So again, collect 2 strands pull up, so we've got one at the beginning, one as central as possible, like so, and one at the very top of the stitch. Again, making sure, as you can see, I'm actually going through the post of this stitch here, not around it. If you go around, that's when it tugs and creates holes. So that's what we've got so far. The next row will either start or end with a double crochet, so we just place one slip stitch in there and pull. Then we've got again a start or an end with a double treble, so again we're placing 3 stitches evenly across here, so one at the beginning, one as central as possible, and one at the end of that stitch. Fingernails do come in handy if you've got them, but if you haven't, like I said, just go down a hook size to actually get in. But then remember, you need to have this quite loose. If it's too tight, it's going to be too hard for you to work into later on. Now then, we're coming up to the aqua colour row, which starts or ends with a double. So again, collect 2 strands of that post and slip stitch. Then this is the last wave row, which is teal, and it ends or starts with a double treble. So again, we need to put 3 stitches evenly across here. So that's one at the beginning, one which is central, and one towards the end, or as close to the end as possible. Like so. Then the very 2 last rows are both double crochet, so we just need a further 2 slip stitches, one in each row end, like so. And then we just snip that off. Finish as you usually would, nice tight knot. And again, you would weave that down the edge, and then as you can see, we have a nice neat row of slip stitches along the edge of our piece of work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, 20, 21, 27, 28, 29. Happy days. So I hope that's been helpful. Like I said, I use a general rule of thumb: 1 slip stitch at the end of a double crochet row, 2 slip stitches at the end of a treble row, and 3 slip stitches into the end of a row that has a double treble if you're using UK terminology, or a treble if you're using American. And in this instance, to keep things neat and tidy, I've skipped the 2 rows where we have the little flashes of colour, one being the lily, the other being the aqua, just to ensure we have the right number of stitches. I hope that was helpful, people. I'm going to do a couple of videos on the beginning of the pattern for the square that we did, for those who may be struggling with that. So hope this was helpful, and I'll speak to you soon. Happy hooking!